Watch this.
The start of the school year is weeks away, but keeping kids safe in school, well, that's never far from the minds of those tasked with making sure that happens. Training under the cloud of the tragedy at a Texas elementary school, resource officers share their experience of working in Boise schools. Never again. That's the mantra of those who were part of something that never should have happened in the first place. Relatives of those forced to relocate return to Minidoka 80 years after their families were first there. Thoughts and prayers. You know, you hear that a lot in response to a tragic event. It's a kind sentiment, sure, but without the action, some say it falls on deaf ears. And mostly because these events, well, they keep happening. This calendar year alone, the United States has seen 407 mass shootings. And that's only accounting for those shootings that injure or kill 4 or more people. That could happen on the street, in a grocery store, or at a school. The Boise School District starts class next week, which is why today, Boise Police School Resource Officers, well, they had an annual training on how to respond to something they hope will never happen here, a school shooting. Here's Andrew Bartline.
At face value, this was never the reason Carrie Fortusco became a school resource officer.
Unfortunately, a reality.
But behind the door, kids' lives are at stake. And being there for the kids, that's the real reason.
You got to be able to reach out to all of the kids and all the different groups, the good ones, the ones who, you know, can make some naughty choices, but they're all good. And you just got to try and reach out to them and help them realize how good they are, even if they make a poor choice.
In her 17 years as an SRO, Carrie's seen her job change, and this annual training puts her responsibility on full display.
You hope that, you know, we do all of this training and we never have to use it, but we just never know if a situation is going to arise.
Carrie and all 16 other Boise police SROs are equipped with the medical gear to respond to a mass shooting and the tactical gear to break down a door and clear the room.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Tawan Lin became an SRO 4 years ago. The work he's doing today, he never imagined.
You know, it's unfortunate. You know what I mean? Back when I went to high school, I think the hardest thing we did was fire drills. You know what I mean? Getting people lined up, try to get outside to a patch of grass. And now today, you know, it's an unfortunate thought that you have to go to school and prepare for active shooters.
Boise Police Captain Spencer Fomby says this training isn't new, but the tactics have evolved. Police have put an emphasis on responding to an active school shooter since Columbine in 1999.
The main thing that we need is for the officers to understand their role in society, that the public expects us to be able to respond to these events, to take decisive action, to make the right decisions under stress.
It takes a certain type of person to do this job. All Boise Police SROs asked specifically for this assignment and competed for it, which is how Tawan landed at Timberline High School.
I try my best to not necessarily present myself as a police officer all the time and just to interact as a person. Because I think that's going to be the best way we can build that bridge, build that rapport and that trust between them to make them want to come to us if they have information or even just talk to us.
Breaking down figurative walls and building a relationship with the kids, that's the other half of the job.
Oh, I've had some students from when I was in a high school come back and see me afterwards, and they were ones that I was like, oh, and they're doing awesome.
With class at the Boise School District starting next week, the focus today is on preparation.
We want the officers to be very proficient in the physical skills so that they can focus on making decisions.
Because building a relationship takes time, and these SROs have all year to work on it.
SROs do a lot of things, but we're in the school primarily for safety.
But responding to a crisis, that happens at an instant, and someone has to be willing to break down that door.
Yes, I am. And I think a majority of us are prepared for that because, you know, it's if you don't go in, then you have to live with that also.
Captain Fomby refers to this training as the tip of the spear. Now, the on-site SROs and their training to respond is crucial, but there's a lot of supplemental training as well, including getting more officers to the school, managing resources, getting information out, and organizing a complete response to the shooting as a whole. These skills are fostered in other regular trainings. And just from talking with these SROs today, Brian, I mean, they really love their work. They really love these kids. That's why they continue to do it. But a lot of them said, you heard them, Been doing this 17 years. I didn't know it would get to this point.
Yeah, when I know this training is an annual thing for them, as you mentioned, but I have to think in the back of their mind, they're thinking of what happened in Uvalde, Texas, and how they don't want that to happen. All of it, but if it does, to how it transpired, have that play out the same way here.
And because of that, I asked them verbatim, you can train for this all you want, but when that shooting happens, that's real life. Are you willing to knock down that door, put your life on the line? Both of the people we talked to today said absolutely. That's why I do this job.
All right. They opt into it. They compete to be on that team. It's amazing. All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. Well, a court date has now been set in the case of the Department of Justice versus State of Idaho. Last week, DOJ announced it has plans to sue Idaho over the abortion trigger law. That's set to go into effect in just about, 3 weeks, August 25th. A judge is going to hear arguments 3 days before that, on August 22nd. The DOJ claims the near total ban violates federal laws that guarantee emergency medical treatment. The law, which was actually passed in 2020, it became relevant after Roe v. Wade was overturned back in June. That ban is going to make all abortions illegal, other than the exceptions. A doctor can perform an abortion if a police report proves the pregnancy was caused by rape or incest, or, if the mother's life is in immediate danger. The lawsuit is the Biden administration's first major intervention into state trigger laws, and there's several of them around the country. And we're still waiting for a decision by the Idaho Supreme Court on 2 lawsuits filed by Planned Parenthood. Those are expected to come down any day now. It was one of the darkest moments in American history. Citizens rounded up and restricted behind barbed wire fences for years. 80 years ago today, one of those incarceration camps opened in southern Idaho. We returned with a few families of those who were forced to live there to find out why they keep coming back. All right, this is the call out for your clever comments and complaints. We'll even take your quirky questions. Just text them to this number, 208-321-5614. Make sure to include your name and the hashtag the 208. And stick around. We could share yours at the end of the show. The bombing of Pearl Harbor may be a day of infamy for a generation of Americans. But for Japanese Americans of that era, there's another day that shoulders just as much shame. On February 19th, 1942, 10 weeks after that attack, President Franklin Roosevelt showed the status of our anti-Asian sentiment by signing Executive Order 9066. That order authorized the military to round up Japanese Americans living along the West Coast, remove them from their homes, force them to abandon their businesses, and leave behind everything but what they could carry. A brutality based on their ethnicity.
The justification for the incarceration orders was that Japanese Americans were committing acts of espionage. The truth of the matter is that the military, through the help of the Federal Communications Commission, realized pretty quickly that none of that was true.
Still, beginning that March, the War Relocation Authority would send more than 120,000 people to 10 remote camps scattered from California to Arkansas, including to one here in Idaho. On August 10th, 1942, the Minidoka internment camp opened, unfinished. Today, the story of the camp shares the same status, as the impacts of that prejudicial imprisonment are still being felt generations later. The Minidoka internment camp opened 80 years ago today, and as you heard, a lot of it was unfinished when thousands of Japanese Americans arrived. With most of them coming from the lush coastal areas around the Northwest, you can imagine the shock of showing up to this dry, dusty destination in Jerome County, Idaho, and told this is where they would live for the duration of the war. Not only that, they had to help finish and build their own confinement, finish the barracks, the other buildings, figure out how to grow food. 80 years later, most of the 13,000 Japanese Americans who spent time there are no longer with us. But their stories are being kept alive through the Minidoka Pilgrimage Committee, a group who tries to make regular trips to what is now a National Historic Site in Hunt, Idaho, operated by the National Park Service. Well, that group made another trip this summer, and we were fortunate enough to tag along to try to grasp the full magnitude of this day in Idaho history. It's the first sight you see at the west entrance, much like those who arrived 80 years ago, to what was then called the Minidoka Relocation Center. The guard tower, one of 8 that once watched over the property. Then the Lava Rock Guardhouse.
Kind of bar that would have been here, right? And a gate.
Which controlled who came in.
And a check-in point.
And who came out. And keeping them in, the barbed wire. Wrapping the perimeter, a fence which wouldn't be in place until months after people moved in. You can see why Relocation Center would be renamed and better known as Incarceration Camp.
So if you want to come a little bit closer, I want to re-welcome everybody here to Minidoka National Historic Site.
Kurt Ikeda is the Director of Interpretation and Education at Minidoka.
120,000 people of Japanese ancestry were incarcerated during World War II.
Kurt's job is to explain how Japanese Americans,
over 13,000 who were incarcerated here at Minidoka during the 3 years of operation,
forced to live here.
The majority being from the Pacific Northwest, Seattleites, Portlanders, 135 folks from Alaska.
Transformed 33,000 dusty, desolate, high desert acres into fertile farmland with more than 640 buildings.
Packed, 40 feet in between these barracks, 40 feet, 40 feet, 40 feet.
A self-sustained city, sort of.
The water systems were not ready until October here, 2 months after construction.
That in 1943 would have been Idaho's 7th largest. Today,
we have Block 19 right over here on this map showing you kind of how far Minidoka was.
The National Historic Site is reduced to just 73 acres, with only 6 original buildings.
To my right-hand side, the root cellar, which we'll walk to.
Along with divulging dramatic numbers.
A 20 by 120 size barrack would have been where our families were incarcerated.
Kurt likes to ask how many of his visitors are here for the first time.
You said Block 42. Can I ask you why that specific block?
Oh, that's where my family was.
This group, though, they've been here before.
This would be Barrack 1 right here. That was my home.
Yep, yeah, Barrack 1 right over here. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Eugene Tagawa arrived in 1942 with his parents and 2 older sisters.
I was born in June of that year, so I was, like 3 months old when I came here. My younger brother was born here.
Eugene was too young to remember much about his time at camp.
And we'll go into enter the barracks.
But that's why he keeps coming back.
Oh, absolutely. Every time is a new experience because the people are different.
Since 2009, Eugene has been part of the Minidoka Pilgrimage Committee.
Dozo.
A group formed nearly 20 years ago to bring together family and friends of former incarcerees back to these barracks.
I encourage you to find a place on the wall that feels appropriate to kind of lay your hand on. And
pre-pandemic, these pilgrimages would boast more than 300 plus people.
To feel history.
To not only see the conditions they faced.
There was a single light bulb, a potbelly stove, army cots with wool blankets, and as you all know the phrase, only what we could carry.
But to honor that generation.
Is there a certain just kind of phrase, a feeling that you get stemming us out here today?
Who had their rights and livelihoods more than just relocated.
Family, connection, healing.
I could feel that. I could feel that in your voice. I could feel that in this space.
Eugene has been back about a dozen times, and it's all still as fresh as the first.
The first time I came on the pilgrimage, I met this man that I'd known when I was in junior high school as a church leader. And he looked at my name tag and he said, "Oh, I know this name." And I said, "Yeah, Howard, I went to a Faith Bible Church when I was in junior high school." He said, "No, I know your father." He said, "I played baseball with your father in camp." And then he told me some stories about my father that I never knew. I didn't know my father played baseball in camp. So that was my first pilgrimage. And I said, whoa, what a gift, right? Yeah. So I kept coming back.
And why Eugene is so encouraged to see the younger generations alongside.
Well, the barracks are just the most intimate spaces, right, that were in these concentration camps.
Aaron Shigaki's family spent nearly 3.5 years at Minidoka.
I guess I can just feel the energy, and I just think about my family and the things that they endured.
Her grandfather's bitterness led them to being one of the last to leave.
He was just so angry the whole time, and he was one of those guys who was like, we leave when they kick us out.
It's that strength of character Aaron wanted to commemorate when she joined the Pilgrimage Committee almost 10 years ago.
You know, I also realized that I didn't know a thing. You know, there was like a paragraph in my 8th grade Washington State history book.
When we think about Minidoka, we think about dust, we think about lack of privacy.
Oh, there's certainly a lot to learn about Minidoka.
Lines for everything.
But maybe there's a lot more to learn from Minidoka.
45 cents per person per day in 1942 was the amount of money spent per person.
I want them to learn the whole story about how a whole community and people were unconstitutionally, unjustly incarcerated because of their race. And I want people to understand that to a certain degree, it's still happening now. I don't think as a country we've fully grappled with it. I know as a community we're not done grappling with it. When these truths can really become part of the American narrative, we're going to be better for it. I really believe that. But we have to tell it all, you know?
Telling it all includes what they endeavored for distraction. There was music and dancing, stage shows and swimming holes. And they played sports like golf and basketball. And of course,
it was
baseball.
One of the only pastimes out here, one of the only distractions from their reality, which was just being out here in this desolate place with nothing around them. And they were just able to forget their situation just for a little bit.
Johnny Narita only knew about Minidoka through family chatter.
Growing up, you always hear about camp. I guess at some point my family kind of gave me the rundown of what it was, what happened, the gravity of it all. And it never really sunk in until I came out here.
In 2016, Johnny joined his grandpa, George Nakagawa, a former player for the Hunt team, for the dedication of the baseball field.
This place has a certain power to it. It's like a place of great trauma and pain, and it's also a place of healing.
Part of that healing happened right here on this field.
And so they honored my grandpa and the other baseball players, and we played catch for a bit. And I think I ran around the bases. Yeah, I'm never gonna forget that. Yeah.
George left his ball and glove to the Minidoka Museum. But when he died a year later, he left something more for his grandson.
It's our legacy, for better or for worse. It's a part of American history and our history that we can't erase, and we shouldn't try to erase it.
For the 13,000 people,
which is what the Minidoka Pilgrimage Committee is really all about.
And this ball field was built as a community effort. Minidoka will always be a community-centered historic site.
Most of the buildings may be gone or coming apart, but to keep them from fading from history or from memory will be about keeping connected.
Oh, the raw egg. Oh yeah, tamago kake.
Those who are already connected.
We are here together now, and we get to reclaim this story. We get to reclaim this place and remember it for what it is, which is a terrible place.
To keep the Minidoka story in clear focus.
It's about remembering this, not forgetting. And just saying never again.
There's one other thing you will notice as you enter the Minidoka Historical Site. It's on the left. There's a 3-panel wooden sign, has an eagle attached to the top. It's called simply the Honor Roll, and it lists the names of the young men and women from the camp who served in the military while their families remained incarcerated. Just think about that. They weren't considered American enough to stay in their homes, but they were American enough to be sent to the front lines of the war. There are nearly 1,000 names on that honor roll. 418 when that sign was first put up just after the camp was opened in 1943, and it was in full view of the guards who were watching over them at the gate. Minidoka had the highest percentage of prisoners serving in the military, by the way. And when the war was over and the incarcerees were allowed to go home, if they had one left, well, most of those 33,000 acres of the camp, they were then offered to returning veterans to farm. Oh, all right. We have a final minute of the show here to get to your comments that you sent in during the show. A little bit about Andrew's story and the SRO's training for a school shooting scenario as the school year is about to start. This one from Karen in Garden City. I agree with SRO officers. I was talking to coworkers today. I can't believe it's come to this. If I were a kid, I'd be afraid to go to school. I respect what the SROs are trying to achieve, but when they face an adversary with body armor and an assault-type weapon, it changes everything. Military-type weapons have to be met with the same, says Bruce in the 208. Anyone who blindly spouts American exceptionalism obviously does not understand the heinous nature of the Japanese internment camps, says Jack in Boise. It was a very telling time that we spent there in Minidoka this summer. So I hope you enjoyed the story we were able to tell. 120,000 people were imprisoned, all victims of fear, ignorance, and war. Why do we have such a hard time learning this is how so much damage is done to countless people? Whether it's war or COVID or how a person votes, we should learn what gives them power. People can learn. Thank you for sharing the story of the Minidoka internment camp. I knew our country did this, but seeing this story brought tears to my eyes. Part of me thinks we are headed in this direction again, war or not. And sadly, will our school-age children not learn this because it will be seen as CRT? It's already very limited right now in our schools, but who's to tell? We'll see you tomorrow.